people of diverse faiths and cultures to promote mutual understanding and respect, and certainly sharing our stories is at the heart of that.
This painted, I'm pointing it towards the middle line.
But you're sitting all over there.
Tonight, we're very excited.
Why are you?
To
Why?
present Sara Abou Rashed. I hope I said it right. She's a nationally known poet and public speaker, and she's the storyteller behind A Map of Myself, which many of you may have seen when she was here in Columbus. A one-woman show on immigration, finding home, language, identity, DNA, and everything in between, which she created with director Larry Smith and performed over 15 times across the country. A Palestinian in origin, Sara was born and raised in Syria, but has called Central Ohio home, although more recently she's been in Michigan, in Ann Arbor. She's been calling Central Ohio home since 2013. Her works appear, this is so impressive for someone as young as she is. Her works appear in the anthology A Land with a People, Poetry Magazine, Poetry Wales, Arab Literature Quarterly, as well as the latest high school English curriculum of McGraw-Hill. Wow. Sara has delivered a TEDx talk and keynoted many national conferences, such as Senator Sherrod Brown's Women's Leadership Conference. With a BA from Denison University, she is currently pursuing her MFA, Master of Fine Arts, in creative writing at the University of Michigan. Let's welcome Sara.
Thank you everyone for coming here and on Zoom. And thank you, Wynn, Worthington, Interfaith Neighbors, for welcoming me. I know we've been trying to make this event happen for a long time, but scheduling and COVID and all the things in between. Is that good lighting for everyone? Yes, as you can see and hear. Okay. Or if in the back, we're good. So tonight's intention is a little bit different than many of the other performances I've done. And that's because for once, I wanted to do more of a community follow-up on what happened in the past on, for those of you who do know me, for those of you who don't, I am really interested in having a conversation about multiple things and kind of catching you up as to what happened. So just out of curiosity, who has heard of me before?
I am.
Okay. Who has seen A Map of Myself? Or a TED Talk or a video? Okay, awesome. That's kind of our majority audience. That was the prediction, and it's a great thing to have an intimate gathering with people who frankly know my story and know it pretty well. So maybe I should have quizzed you on that. But I do have a presentation. Just a few slides to guide us along.
Sara,
Yes,
could you hold the microphone
closer?
Yes.
Ooh, like this, okay. Perfect.
You can minimize.
Let's minimize this and expand this. All right. So today's title is A Map of Myself, and we'll find out what happens. I want to start in a moment I do not usually begin my story with, and that is a moment a few years ago when, after having shared my story and done a map of myself many times, I remember telling my mom, who's here, that sometimes I get sick and tired of my own story, and I wish I would wake up and be a different person. How many of you feel like that some days? And the truth is, it was a new emotion for me. I have loved sharing my story. I know that I have a voice that people love to listen to, and I know how important it is to be doing the work of sharing our stories. But this happened after I shared it many times, and there was a certain kind of stuckness that sometimes we are frozen in our own moments and we feel, can I become anyone else? What next? Who else am I? And am I always defined by the past? That's a big question. So that was around graduation. I graduated from Denison University in 2021. And my mom said, you'll graduate, you'll grow up, you'll get older, and you'll have a different story. And I still believe this is probably one of the only times my mother has ever lied to me. Because the truth is, I still stuck with my name and I still have my own story. But she's kind of a little bit right in that more things happened that made the big things get smaller and new moments add up. And that really what growing up has meant to me. So this was, again, graduation, all the feelings of, I don't know what next. I don't know who am I, I don't know what job or what step I'm going to do next. And yet I'm still very much defined by the past. So for those of you who do not know me, now I will get to say a little bit more about that past that is very much still weighing in my story and still carried with me wherever I go. So my family and I are originally from Palestine. We're from a coastal city called Haifa, right up there by the dome, kind of. And unfortunately, I have never been to Palestine. In 1948, when settlers were taking over new cities, people native to those lands started fleeing elsewhere. So my family went to Syria. My great-grandmother was actually a Jewish immigrant from Russia who had come all the way to be in safe and peaceful Israel. And yet, it wasn't safe even for her. She fell in love with a neighbor's son. She married a Palestinian. And when the time came, she chose to become a refugee and leave the country that she came for with him. So my great-grandparents left to Syria, which is very close, a neighboring country. And over 800,000 Palestinians left Palestine at that point. The majority of the population really became refugees, either internally in other areas in Palestine where they fled to different cities, or externally to Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. And that's how we became other things. So for us, we became Palestinian Syrians because I was born in Syria, my parents were born in Syria, but we still carried that story and blood with us. And in Syria, they welcomed us. We lived as happily as any Syrian could. We lived in a particular Palestinian neighborhood in Damascus called Al-Yarmouk camp, which was made entirely of descendants of Palestinian refugees. And even though it still carried the name of the camp, by the time I grew up, the camp was no camp at all. It was an entire city full of restaurants and schools and shopping centers and exciting things that people came and traveled to see. And yet, the identity of displacement still carried in that place. We spoke a Palestinian accent, we cooked Palestinian food. We were always reminded that we're originally Palestinian because we were not allowed citizenship in Syria. That's where my family has lived for years. Until one of my uncles decided to come here in the 80s for college. And he actually came to Otterbein University, which is a big part of a map of myself if you've watched it. It's a fun little story about how he, as a valedictorian in a little place in Syria, could come here and study and frankly plant new roots. And for the longest time, my grandma, every phone call would say, "When are you coming back? You know, just pack up and come." And instead, we were shocked to find out that it would be us who would follow him. So he's been here since the 80s. It's been over 40 years. And when the war in Syria happened, we had no choice except for us to flee yet again and to add a different stop in another journey of emigration and displacement this time. So we're very glad he did not come back to Syria, because at least we could come here. I like to show this photo, and I still hold on to it because this is one of the last things I remember of Syria. This was my middle school. I was in 7th grade. And it was a newly renovated building that everyone was very excited about. But unfortunately, one day there was a bomb close by, and everyone fled that building, including myself. We were all over the streets. We didn't know what to do. Even the mic is dropped. But
Yeah.
all right.
Right.
Thank you.
It looks like a really large middle school. How many were there?
How many? So middle schools in Syria, we had for each grade, I want to say at least 5 to 8. Maybe a few hundred, 500. Yeah. It was a walking distance, about 10 minutes. This was an UNRWA school, United Nations school, because Palestinians were registered with the United Nations as refugees. And so their schools were actually kind of better than regular public schools, well-funded. The teachers, thank you so much. The teachers were paid a lot better. It was a different system. It was a credit system. But we were so excited about the new building, and unfortunately, within months, it transformed to even worse than what it was. So remember that stuckness I spoke about. Part of me still holds onto these because they're some of the last things from my time in Syria, but also because all the places we visit, parts of us are still a little bit there, no matter where we go elsewhere. And Syrians in particular have had a very hard time with education ever since the war started more than 10 years ago. So I'm always reminded of all the other students who didn't get to continue their education, who became refugees in Jordan, in other places in Syria. I'm sure some of you may have heard about the recent earthquake in northern Syria, and those populations themselves have been displaced many times over. And unfortunately, to think that entire cities will now be transformed back into camps instead of camps becoming cities. But my own journey has taken me elsewhere, and we actually have a representative of such. We have one of my former teachers, Ms. Newcomer. Thank you so much for being here. It really means a lot to me. And my time at Centennial was strange and interesting. And I was a very nervous freshman. I didn't know anything. I barely spoke the language. I remember not knowing how to ask to use the restroom. And I didn't even know the whole pass system. Someone has to give you a pass to go. So sometimes I just get up and leave in the middle of the class. But all these little things that kept reminding me that I'm different, whether wearing the headscarf and realizing I'm one of very few students there, or speaking Arabic with my cousin and kind of finding English weird, which I'm sure they found the opposite. So all these little moments that truly made my high school experience was wonderful and different in all kinds of ways. That is where I've transformed the most, because I came in not speaking any English, and I left having really found my voice, I would say. And one of the most transformational things for me was the moment that I started writing poetry in English, because I'd always written poetry in Arabic. But one day the teacher said, you should try the poetry club. You should try the writing club. And I didn't even know that was a thing. So I gave up lunch once a week to go to do the poetry club instead. And it was phenomenal, right? I started with very terrible poems, bad grammar and vocab and things I didn't know how to spell. And then ended up doing the slam poetry team multiple times and competing at the city and district level multiple times. So poetry club was the secret. Those are some photos from different things I did all throughout high school. And then came college. And my wise mother, it seems she's always said something that really stuck with me for every stage. And for Denison, I wasn't sure I was going to go there, to be honest. I applied to many universities, some of them even out of state, and my mom was afraid that I wouldn't get in because she didn't want me to be so far from her as an only child. But I went to Denison's campus and I loved it. It was so pretty and new and welcoming and just really comforting. But that's when, once again, I realized I'll have to be different, a different kind of experience this time, a different kind of challenge. This time, I spoke the language. I felt like I knew who I was. I had done so many speaking things and poetry things around Columbus, but there was only one other girl wearing the headscarf on the entire campus. And very few people knew me. So it felt like I'd have to reintroduce myself to the country and to the community once more. And that's something I realized we do a lot in our lives. Unfortunately, we don't wake up one day and feel like we're done introducing the world to ourselves. We have to keep doing it. And my mom said, if you don't go there, somebody braver will. That is no easy challenge for a teenager, to be told that perhaps you don't have the bravery to do something you really want to, I think that alone made me say yes. And I ended up going to Denison and also struggling a lot my first and second years, mainly with making friends, with feeling like I belonged, with feeling like everyone else, saw me for me and not for what I represent, not for my country or my religion or my headscarf or my history or my accent or all these things that weighed on me. But once again, teachers and poetry saved me. I studied international relations and creative writing because I realized that politics and poetry go together, and that you could do so much with putting matters into words, with delivering them to people, with being creative and creating things and continuing to tell your stories and adding a personal touch to the politics of everything. And because the personal is always political, and we cannot take apart these things. So that's when I met some very fundamental people in my life, like Larry Smith, whom I ran into at a TEDx Columbus event. And at the time, I knew nothing about him except that he was married to Piper Kerman, which is, it's a cool thing. You're like, yeah, everyone wants to know someone famous in Columbus. But Larry was initially a journalist, and he did the 6-word memoirs project. So he would lead workshops where people can tell their entire life story in 6 words. And I was one of the participants in his workshops, and I said something like, left the war, or left war, war didn't leave me. And Larry was very intrigued. He said, say more. And we kept talking, and he realized there is a much bigger story in this. And even though I was telling them in poetry and a little bit of speaking here and there, it was really a theater production worth of a story. And that's how A Map of Myself came to be. We decided to tell it in its entirety. And it's really important for someone young, for a woman specifically, who has left different her entire life, to feel like for once she can tell her story on her own terms. I never thought I would do theater, but it was my own story. And I got to tell it in a way that really satisfied me on multiple levels: the creative, the poet, the personal, the political. And when I was asked, who's your audience? I said, I hope it's a window for those who don't know anything about my life story, and a mirror for those with similar stories. And I hope I succeeded in that. Every time I told it, it was exciting. It was doing these 2 things at once, right? And I have a few, it's going backwards. So here are a few shots, action shots, from A Map of Myself, where I got to perform it over 15 times in Ohio, in Philly, Chicago, multiple cities. And like I said, every time it was different. Every time it was exciting and nerve-wracking. And it was me, telling my own story and those of many other immigrants. And frankly, claiming a place at the table, claiming America, claiming my name, claiming my voice, and getting to know myself more and more with each telling. So I'd love to hear from you after about, what you thought the show did for you and what you thought watching it, frankly. Because by the end of that, COVID happened, unfortunately. And I couldn't get a chance to do it as many times as I had hoped. And now enough time has passed that I look back and think, you know, that frozenness starts to emerge again. It's so exciting, and that it tells us, you know, it lets us do things we're not able to do in our everyday, but at the same time, it can confine us to a specific version of the story. And with a show, you know, I got to do many times, I had to memorize every word. I couldn't just change it as many times as I was changing. I couldn't forever be empty inside of that story. You know, eventually I became 20 and 21 and more. So now we're back to graduation. And something so special happened then, which is I was selected to be the student commencement speaker. And it touched me in such a deep way because, you know, I thought my entire 4 years here, I didn't feel like anyone represented me. I felt like I stood out. I wore the headscarf and people stared at me and people, you know, didn't always see me for who I am. And yet to have this special moment of, once again, speaking for myself, but also addressing the entire class community. That was truly special. And of course, I mentioned my mom and the reason I ended up going to Denison. And now my mom teaches at Denison. It's an important detail of the story. And following Denison, I decided to get my master's. And you might have heard it in the bio, but where do you think this is? If you don't know. Michigan, yeah. Although it looks a lot like downtown Columbus, specifically the statue. I guess I took it with me. Just planted it there. But for some odd reason, they have an identical statue. And Michigan has been awesome. I try not to tell people there that I'm from Ohio. I think they hate us a little bit more than we hate them. It's interesting. But it was, to be honest, the most difficult decision I've made, because up until then, I had always played it safe. And even with all the things I did, all the speaking and the show, it felt natural. It felt like the next step. But I cried so much in the process of deciding to leave Columbus and do my master's at Michigan because I was an only child and I'm very close with my family. And I felt a different kind of feeling with this move. And I talked to friends and I talked to mentors on the phone. And then I realized that this was perhaps the only move not enforced. Every other move and displacement in my family's story was an escape. And for once, it was really hard to choose to do something from the heart because of passion, because of love, because I want to do something for me. And because poetry means a lot to me, that I want to study it at one of the best universities. And I want to introduce myself once again to a new community that knows nothing about me or who I am in Columbus or what I've done. And it's crazy to think that those 2 years have gone by so fast, and I'm now in my last semester. So I'll actually be graduating within 2 months. And I've grown as a person, as a poet, as an artist. I'm working on my first poetry book, which I cannot wait to come back here and share with you. We'll see, publication takes years. But it's, it's a different kind of move, like I said, and each time it has been filled with new chapters, new faces. Something amazing about Michigan is that it's very diverse and it has a lot of Arabs. So I am by no means the only Muslim woman. In fact, it's the complete opposite. You walk around and everyone is wearing a headscarf. You're like, how do I stand out now? What do I do? Do I wear a name tag? But I'm happy to say I made a lot of wonderful friends who are just, who share my values, some of my stories, but also are very different in their own ways, who have come from different places. And not only that, but Michigan is the first time I have taught my own students. So I'm now a graduate instructor, and this is the last day of class with my students last semester. All freshmen who looked up to me like I knew everything. When really, I was just a freshman myself, but life moved on at a fast and exciting pace, and it hasn't always been easy, but it has been interesting. And to go from student to poetry teacher, creative writing teacher, that has been really exciting. So in short, this is kind of my map. From Haifa to Damascus to Columbus to Ann Arbor. And again, we're doing this at a time when I'm asking myself, what next? And it's hard to be content and to say, I know for sure or for certain. So we'll see. I have to keep you posted. But something that occurred to me recently, specifically on a drive from Ann Arbor to Columbus, my family and I accidentally took the countryside exit instead of the regular, easier highway. And we kept looking at these small towns on the way and the barns and the corn. And I realized that foreignness is the ability to compare. I'll say that again. Foreignness is the ability to compare. That every time you have a reference for something else, you might be a foreigner. And what I mean is that it's very hard to go someplace and just see it for what it is. Because we were seeing these small towns and we kept thinking, oh, in Syria, the countryside is this. In Palestine, I imagine the countryside is this. So we didn't have a single reference. We didn't see, Findlay, Ohio for what it is. We compared it with everything else we know. So think about all the times you're a foreigner, whether you know it or not, simply by comparison, by your ability to have had multiple references of the same thing. And this is also true of language, of translation. When you think of a word and you know other ways to say it. So, new chapters, new places. This is from a recent trip to Saudi Arabia, the first Arab country I visited in 10 years. And it was phenomenal to, go back and hear Arabic in a different accent altogether, in a way that I personally don't speak or understand easily. But to remind myself that new places are going to join that map, and new chapters and new versions of myself. And here my mom and I are wearing the traditional black abaya, and my mom said, it's interesting, we become different people when you're somewhere else. And even though this isn't the way I would dress every day here, it felt only right to do that there because everyone else was wearing it. So places change us. And sometimes I think we are the consistent versions of ourselves that we hold on to, no matter the surroundings. Also, how cute is that camel? So now I want to turn it to you and ask you, when have you felt foreign and where has your own map taken you? I have some index cards. And like I said, I'd love for you to take one and pass it around. And just have a moment of community reflection and hear about your own experiences with difference, with travel, with being different versions of yourself. Well, I'm reading it. We'll get to it. Yes. Okay. We'll chat. We'll chat. I'm sorry.
Sarah, while we're passing these out, we have a question from somebody on Zoom, kind of going back to, I think, the idea that you said you felt like you were kind of frozen in your one-woman show. This question is, have you thought of writing a play with different characters?
Excellent question. Yes. So the one-woman show has a limitation, obviously, of being one person. But it's really awesome to try and embody different people. And I would love to do a second show. In fact, I'm really thinking about it. And I think it's only time to capture all that has happened, all the difference, and all the new interests, and the themes and the obsessions that we have with us, you know, that are different than where I was when I was, you know, my first year, second year at Denison. So yes, that's a great question. I'll give you all a minute to try and write down your answer. Yeah, do we need pens? You could keep it. Who needs a pencil? Do you have a pen?
Still foreigner or be part of something? No, I'm asking.
Yeah.
And we want to accept the culture is dog. Inside your culture, existing in your own culture, to adopt, to know, to love, and to respect and do you feel that?
I feel less a foreigner than I did before, but I still know that there is something a little bit different, and there always
Yeah,
is.
but face,
Mhm.
language,
Yes.
it was always foreign.
Mhm.
But beside that, mentally, if you are a part of
Yeah.
the community, and you accept their culture and their custom, then you come more closer.
For our guests on Zoom, if you could repeat the questions.
So the question was, do I still feel like a foreigner or not? And I said I feel less like a foreigner than I did in the past, but there is still something different. And I don't anticipate that ever going away. In fact, one of the unique things about my story and my family's is that we have no place to go back to. So Palestine as our origin, we're not allowed to enter, and Syria is still under war, and we will not again enter. So sometimes we're even envious of people who have left and still can go back over the summer and say, we get to see family. Unfortunately, every one of our family is somewhere outside. So that foreignness, stays somewhere.
You are 100% right. People who born here, still they
Yeah.
feel foreigner, and the
Yeah.
other people think that foreigner.
Did everyone write something down?
I wrote it.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a quick question.
Yes.
When did you give the TED talk?
I gave the TED Talk when I was 17.
How does that happen? How does one get selected? Did you apply or?
I applied
Okay.
and I saw the application. It was an event that comes around every few years, I think. Not for a while, it wasn't annual, but they had a TED Youth section that if you were under a certain age, you can apply and even send a little bit about yourself, a video recording. And I didn't think anything would come out of it, to be honest, but then it happened. Other questions? Yes.
I don't have the paper to write, but when I was.
So much to choose from.
from.
Great in-store design services are budget and are time well spent.
Because I work with a lot of foreigners, and I think as being a foreigner, I can help my patients. And I can understand a lot of these people coming up from, a lot of from Syria, from Afghanistan, we have patients from all over. And that would be really nice as a foreigner, like some of my coworkers, they don't understand what they're going through. So since I went through it, and I will understand the language and I understand, because I explain to my coworker why they're going through, why they're, especially when they have children coming here, they don't speak, and their family, they don't speak the language, and they can go to school. And they don't understand what's going in the school. I'm trying to teach them, they're coming from different cultures. And you be a good role models for a lot of these people come from other countries. And help their parents when they don't know the language to tell them, what you went through, so let them understand. They can't do the things they do in their country here because these kids messed up. I think some of my patients messed up because they come from other country and our parents treat them the way they want it back home. And now kids is pregnant. The girl has the 14 years old is pregnant. And we have a lot of, that is really good to have somebody like you and you from other countries and to help the family come from other places.
It's really difficult to adjust to a different way of living. And I think I want to say something important here, which is foreignness is not just something for immigrants. I've had a lot of people who've been here for generations tell me, sometimes even we don't feel part of our own communities. And they, you wouldn't see it on their faces. But that's the thing about being human, is moving and feeling like an outsider, an insider. And those change over time, and those constantly change. And people grow up and they marry and they move. So yeah, I want to invite you to think of foreignness in a new way, to think of it as, again, comparison, as references, as the ability to imagine other things. If you visited a library, maybe in Prague or Brazil, and you look here, you might say, that's not how it is elsewhere. And that there's a little bit of foreignness in that. And that's not always a bad thing. Most of the time, it's actually a great thing. It means you have lived a rich enough life to see many versions of the same thing.
With your experience and your language skills, it would seem to put you in a good position to help other people that, as she said, are dealing with foreigners, whether it's an awful lot of countries. People have been displaced from countries, and as you said, even people that have grown up here for generations and still feel that.
Yeah, my hope and my mission, I think, is to connect people. And one of my absolute favorite speaking things I got to do last year was a big training conference for cultural exchange programs, where they brought all the managers from different states. And we talked about what it means to truly exchange cultures. It's an exciting thing. People sign up for it willingly because they want to experience new things. So I'm, spot on. All right. So here's what we're going to do. Please keep thinking of questions. I am so happy to answer them. And like I said, the intention is to really have a community conversation and just bring up issues we don't talk about every day. I do want to read to you some poems. And then I want you to share your answers with the stranger. So everyone is leaving with a new friend. Not with. Up to you, either way. Oh my God, English, man. All right. So here's a new poem about language. In this language, about my childhood in this language, because I don't have a childhood in this language. As a teenager, I pulled the teeth of memory from one mouth, buried them in another language. In Arabic, we have 14 words for love. Can you say the same of your language? In Arabic, I've never been in love. That, frankly, is bullshit. Excuse my language. This accent of yours is sometimes an ill-fitted denture nailed to my gums, made of shrapnel and rotten language. In Arabic, I'm still a child, robbed of future tense. Exile is a rupture, a grammatical error of language. I walk the limits of what can be said to tell stories of extremes lived. What, if anything else, is language? Something I'm also really intrigued about is names. And, my grandma calls me Sarah sometimes, in Arabic it's Sara, but I truly think of myself as a Sarah. And I don't know what that says about me or about how I've gotten used to my name, but this poem emerged out of that. Inheritance. A woman by my name was my mother's friend. In Hebrew, a woman by my name is a princess. A woman by my name married Abraham. I heard she invented earrings when she cut through the flesh of his newer wife. A woman by my name is a jealous lover. A woman by my name pronounces our name differently. A woman by my name gave up on love. A woman by my name lived happily, like the name in Arabic suggests, or miserably, like it inversely conjured. A woman by my name is the village's matriarch. A woman by my name is no woman at all, poor child on a boat. A woman by my name is always trying, is a mother tired from hearing her name. A woman by my name moved to a different country and changed her name. A woman by my name may be reading this now or hearing it, perplexed that we're tied by only letters in a name.
Well done.
Thank you. All right. Two more poems. So there's a website called Current World Population that will show you in real life, real time, how many people are born and dying in this second. And I loved checking it for a while. It's so interesting to see us all as members. So here's something about collectiveness and individualism. Current world population. I checked today, 8 billion and change that keeps changing. It doesn't settle the meter. About 186,000 births, nearly 80,000 deaths, and it's not even noon. The news doesn't tell it like it is, but the dead are fewer than the newly born, which themselves aren't many considering. I had hoped to meet love before the skin around my eyes started creasing, so I look up in my age group how many Americans there are, how many Palestinians, then like me, Palestinian Syrians. It's concerning, they say. First world nations are growing old. So I'm trying to find myself among fellow double, triple counts or the missing statistics. I had a nightmare. I was living my real life. I'll never get to say we met as teens or spent years in anticipation without a box. Arabs are no race. White, though not. Muslims are another story. It's hard to categorize this murky a population's natural envy. Besides, who's who and according to whom? Arab Americans, you may find us in altered last names, vanished villages, heavy letters on weakened tongues. Did you know New York's little Syria predates Syria itself? Bless our governments and golden age. The clocks of the third world haven't always been lagging. I don't boast, but ask to be called Palestinian American, relish in the oxymoron. What does it matter to find or be found? It's true, so many are young, but dying. In El Paso, Texas, a father shouted on TV, no parent should have to bury their child, and I couldn't decide which is worse. For daily, children bury their parents, and in the same coffin, their youth. It's terrifying to be anything to anyone. I'm alone for now, still to the world, extending my palm. All right, one more, and then we'll make friends and take questions, yes. What I hope to leave behind. My mother keeps asking if poetry changes the world. I started to call myself a language artist after struggling a while to name my medium. Do you feel this? I made this with you. I'm making this. My favorite professor and the girl who hated me most said the same thing. You're always writing that one thing. I don't say it, but I know I'm not that different. Like I know it's a cliche to confess it or deny. But scratch it. We don't speak of cliches and poetry, yet here I am fixed a moment, a line, and I wish I could know more about you. Do your friends roll their eyes when they hear again that one story you tell so often? Even your pauses feel memorized. See, I knew it. We're not that different. And no, I'm not trying hard to relate to you. What I am is scared of forgetting and getting forgotten. My people and I are not alone in loss, simply lonely. I'd like to be famous, so they say. Some of them are famous for other than dying. If context is a medium, it might be mine. Words are copper casings we collect for company. On the other side, the end of occupation and of life, how the bullet quickly launches, how like this, how it travels like now, how it hits. Poetry must, my mother says. Poetry must. You hear me? And it really could. Thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
Are those for your new book?
Well, yes,
Are those for your new book?
yes, those are very new, and I'll let you know when that is.
I have a question.
Yes.
Now, something I learned when I started looking at different states is that Americans are decidedly unoriginal when it comes to naming things. So you will find a Rome in like all 50 states. We are very, very fond of naming things after our first president. Washington is everywhere, Franklin is everywhere. Do you guys actually notice that we just basically borrowed the names of other cities and other countries?
I think it's a great thing, actually, because, you know, in Ohio, there is an East Palestine. And there's Lebanon and Carmel, yeah, so it's unoriginal in that it's copied, but it's
Yeah, they brought it.
pronounced differently. It's,
Oh, it's
yeah.
pronounced.
differently, yeah.
Like, oh, that's America for you.
Other questions?
Uh, so since you showed us a map where you live in Palestinian, Korea, and the United States of America.
Mhm.
What middle school happened? Was it the construction?
What happened with the middle school?
Hmm.
The destruction of the war.
Oh,
War's bad.
You know, on the day that you had to leave, or
No, it happens over time, but that's.
There's another question online here. Let me see if I can find it again. It went away. They're asking about a museum in Ann Arbor. Oh, in Dearborn, sorry.
There is a really wonderful museum called the Arab American National Museum.
That's the one.
Dearborn. And Dearborn is kind of the Arab capital and has been for a very long time. So it's, yeah, it's a very.
And they wondered if you had been there. Yes.
I visited us, yeah, a few times. Great food.
Show them.
Yeah. Maybe one more question?
One of the other online people says, you are an inspiration. Your poetry is so moving. I have no doubt that you will use your gifts and talents to make this world a better place. Thank you for sharing your story, is what she said. So.
Should we take a photo?
right.
That's good. All of us.
you just do that you're just part immediate.
A little bit more mature. Yeah, I'd be 23 now. If you're doing the math.
Yeah. 123.
Wow.
Easy.
I think I know if you move back to Columbus, once now that you're almost done with school.
Yeah. So even those whole 2 years, it feels like I've been back and forth because I've visited family many times.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I can't believe how quickly it happened. No, I don't know. I want to move back to.
You all still have family in Syria,
Thankfully, not very close family, not immediate family, but it's,
they're from them.
I don't think so.
that's another thing. Sometimes people who leave, that frozenness feels like you imagine the place that has stayed the same and the people, especially since none of us went back to Palestine or to Syria. It's really hard to imagine what it is now. And to even remember that it's still going on and having a life of its own without.
And how has your poetry changed from from the first time you started writing? Until years later.
That. And maybe. Because, actually, you share.
It's so interesting hearing your perspective because like as your teacher, did I have you your freshman year? I think so. And when you talk about like feeling awkward, like I was always really struck by like your independence and like how just kind of fearless, like you seem. I teach French, so it was a world language class, so I don't know if that helps, but you never seemed, you always just struck me as like mature and just like fearless. And I was all, I mean, you know how much I love you and you're always going to be one of my faves. But even when you did poetry in high school, like it's obviously evolved, but like it still has that same like passion and powerfulness that you did back in the high school. Like she's always been, it's probably not hard to imagine that she was this impressive because she's still such a young lady, but you know, I've always, you're just incredible.
Personally, I feel my poetry changed from kind of simple and more emotion driven. So a little bit more underwritten. I would tell you some of the truth and leave you to make up your own mind. And I think that's, factor both in me having read a lot more, but also knowing English a lot better, studying more literary writing than just slam poetry or spoken word, which is a lot of passion and emotion and vulnerability. And I don't think we should do that all the time. I think it's very productive. People love to see it and receive it. But sometimes you take joy in writing something people will remember years later.
I think the thing that's amazing is someone who tried to learn 2 other languages and failed miserably, that you were able to learn and master English at such a level. And use words. I mean, you have to work words a lot more in poetry than you do in just business letters.
I was just wondering, do you find yourself struggling a little bit with Arabic now, either speaking it fluently or writing it? Because that's what I find when I try to write in Urdu, which is my native language. I find that my words come to me much more easily in English than they do in Urdu. Yeah. I'm doing a translation of a book for some friends recently, and I actually had to look up the meaning on Google. I just do it. So, do you find that with Arabic?
Honestly, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard to maintain
Yes.
Arabic at the same level that I do English. Right? English, I've read theory and complicated things and written papers, and my Arabic is still not very academic. Maybe sometimes I surprise myself and it comes out all at once, and sometimes I also struggle with words.
Especially when you're in your environment, you're listening to English and speaking English all the time. And maybe you're just speaking a little bit of your Arabic at home with your family. You know that. And my grandchildren don't speak any Urdu at all. They
Something I,
understand it, but they don't speak it.
exactly. Something I say a lot is I'm smarter in English and funnier in Arabic. But I think I'm getting away with thinking. So let's get up, meet someone new, who's comfortable with it. Say hello and share what you wrote on your cards. So. Yeah. Let's. Sorry to cut your conversations short. Class like. Okay.
Now,
We're so excited. Well, thank you everyone for coming. We want to officially wrap up and say this was really wonderful. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for, giving us an hour of your time or more actually on a Tuesday night. So thank you, Katie, for organizing and thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much. It was wonderful. And your poetry was fabulous. Before everybody goes, I want to thank you all for coming tonight in person and online. Want to talk about a couple of upcoming events that we have. On the table in the back, we have some information about our Conversation Partner Program, which is going to be starting again. This is our new post-COVID effort. And this is a very exciting new way of doing conversation partners. We're looking for people who want to learn English, as well as those who want to be mentors to those learning English. And if you want to know more about the program, we have a flyer back there, plus the schedule. But the orientation for our mentors will be March 14th, 10:30 a.m. at Worthington United Methodist Church. And I encourage people to get involved with this program. I've talked to many, many people who've said it made such a big difference in their lives to have someone help them practice their English. So that would be a great way to help. Also on March 20th at 11 o'clock at Noor Islamic Center, we are going to have a program about Ramadan, just sort of explaining what is Ramadan and doing it in the context of the Islamic Center there. So that's 11 o'clock on March 20th. And I'll be sending out an announcement about that on our emails too. And then on March 28th is our next Sharing Our Stories. And this one is going to be something really interesting and different from what we've done before. Julie Hart is going to talk about her journey to the Mennonite faith as an adult convert. So you don't hear that. Most Mennonites are born into that faith, and this is somebody who chose that faith. So that will be our next Sharing Our Stories. So thank you very much for coming, and hope to see you all again. Right. Sign up on our sign up sheet and also like us on Facebook. Thank you. Get a picture.